the right to assemble. They have the right to protest. But we have the right to tell people who can and cannot speak.
The man convicted of killing 2 New York City police officers spoke to the SUNY Brockport community tonight. A controversial event that followed weeks of protest and tension, which continued off the campus this evening. And we have team coverage tonight. Good evening. I'm Doug Embledge. Ginny has the night off. The event drew debate from the start, and it took many turns along the way. Jalil Muntaqim was convicted in 1971 of murdering 2 New York City police officers. The college says he was invited by a professor at the school on the basis of freedom of speech. Well, tonight we hear from that convicted killer himself and gauge reaction on the campus. Our reporters are standing by live from SUNY Brockport. We begin with 13 Wham's Dan Schreck.
Doug, there were some tense moments leading up to tonight's event, but when Muntaqim began speaking, for those willing to listen, there was silence.
Consider this to be a grave threat.
It was one of the most controversial tickets in town. SUNY Brockport inviting Jalil Muntaqim to speak to its students.
We have learned through this process that there are individuals out there, particularly law enforcement, who try to silence me, who wants to silence the idea that someone can express something outside of their norm.
The engagement sparking controversy from the start, none of which was lost on the students who registered for the virtual event.
I just always kind of wanted to educate myself on the history of our country.
History major Emily Luckner says the controversy stems from Muntaqim's actions earlier in life and has nothing to do with his message now.
It's really a unique opportunity for myself and for my peers to understand from a firsthand experience of racism and how this has affected, because I'm a white person living in America. I don't understand what Black people go through. So for me to have a glimpse into what people experience, it's really important, I think.
Over the course of the nearly 2-hour speech, Muntaqim touched on his involvement with the Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Army. While Muntaqim addressed his decades behind bars, he did not mention his conviction in the death of 2 New York City police officers, rather saying he was imprisoned for fighting white supremacy.
I spent 49 years, nearly 50 years in prison for my activities in regards to fighting against white supremacy.
For journalism student Daniel Curry, he says the issue boils down to freedom of speech.
This platform was meant for him to tell his story and his experiences, and it was his story to tell, and he told it the way he wanted to tell it.
And again, we go back to what you said in the beginning, Doug, and what you heard Daniel Curry say there. This was a freedom of speech issue for many. Muntaqim saying his piece and the demonstrators tonight saying theirs.
All right, Dan, thank you. Hours before that speech tonight, there were dueling demonstrations just off the college campus. 13 Wham's Carla Rogner was in the middle of it and tells us at times the tensions were high tonight. Carla?
Yeah, that's right. It started out as a peaceful protest here on Holly Street earlier tonight, and a group has actually been protesting Muntaqim's speech for weeks here. But when they were met by a counter-protesters tonight, things got tense. Division on Holly Street. On one side of the street, people protesting Jalil Muntaqim speaking to the SUNY Brockport community, like a retired police sergeant who says Muntaqim has no place speaking to college students.
I think it's despicable that the SUNY system would allow a killer to talk to children. That's absolutely wrong. It's despicable. It's terrible.
Across the street, a group mostly made up of students held signs with messages like Black Lives Matter. Some students say they want the protesters to leave their campus alone.
I think it's fine for him to come here. I think people are just overreacting a little bit about the whole situation.
Students say most of the people protesting the speech are not Brockport students.
And I think that shows progression among young people, among college kids especially, that we're progressive and that we want everybody to feel included.
When the two protests began to collide, police broke up the groups and put up a barricade. As the speech began, several students joined virtually, even playing it loudly on a boombox. And while students and the university pointed to free speech for bringing Muntaqim to campus,
This doesn't make sense to me because he's been in prison for 40 years. He was released by the system that these people are supporting, and he's on parole. He has freedom of speech like the rest of us. Why can't he speak at a public university?
Those on the other side say They too have the right to free speech to protest.
There is free speech, and we are exercising our free speech under the First Amendment by being here to tell the world what backless, spineless people there are in the Brockport University and the university system in general.
And over the last few weeks, news of this controversial speech spread really quickly, and you could tell even tonight passerbys knew what was going on here. Lots of people honking their horn either in support or opposition.
A town-wide property assessment in Penfield is leaving some homeowners wondering how their home's value increased by so much. In some cases, the increase 6 figures. 13 WAM's Chase Howell found out why the reassessment wasn't delayed during the surging housing market and how people can challenge their assessments. Chase?
Doug, Penfield's town supervisor says the town delayed reassessment for the last 2 years. I spoke with a homeowner today who says his assessment is significantly higher than market value and worries it'll only get worse. Rick Isaacs puts his hands on his head in frustration. He lives in Penfield and just got a letter from the town that his home was reassessed.
I personally felt like we were getting destroyed. I said, we could actually lose our home. People are going to lose their homes over this. They're going to be forced to sell.
In 2021, his home was valued at $375,000. A year later, his new assessment put his home at $516,000, raising his home's value by $141,000. An estimated $70 more a month in taxes.
I see this as an utterly ridiculous number. I see this as that the town of Penfield is going to grab on to as high of a number as they can. They're going to lower the number now, the calculation, and then over time, over the next 5 years, that calculation is going to get higher and higher and higher.
The reassessment is aimed at leveling the playing field for taxes. Penfield Town Supervisor Maurice Senti says the last town-wide reassessment was back in 2014. It's been postponed the last 2 years because of the pandemic, which is why property owners are now seeing a bigger increase.
Assessment is based on 3 years of prior sales. Okay, so it's not just a short-term spike. It's not looking at 1 year. It's looking at 3 years. And the reason for that is to eliminate those short-term spikes.
Senti says you can challenge your assessment. Meeting with the town assessor can be scheduled online or over the phone. But first, do your homework.
In order to prepare for that assessment, though, you do need to have some comparable sales from your neighborhood. You need to have 3 recent comparable sales to present. And then you can have a discussion with someone from the assessment department.
But Isaac says scheduling that meeting hasn't been that simple.
I've not filed a grievance yet, only because I can't get through the line. There's so many people trying to get through, so many people trying to get in. They don't have any openings right now.
Now, an important date you need to remember if you plan on filing an informal hearing. The appointment needs to be made before April 8th. Again, that date, April 8th. You can do that by calling the assessor's office or making an appointment online.